To be honest, Legacies isn't entirely awful and is definitely unwatchable. And I don't know if this is a hot take, but if you actually remove the first 4 seasons of the Vampire Diaries, the quality of the Vampire Diaries would be just as bad as Legacies. Which is exactly where the problem lies. Legacies didn't actually take what made the first 3 seasons of the Vampire Diaries good to great seasons. I think it would take what made the originals a good show, and that is its direct predecessor. Legacies, however, took every problem that both shows had at their worst and compiled it into one show. These problems I'm referring to are the 3 issues I'm going to be going through today, which are the problems with the mythology or the world building, the poor character writing, and the dreadful villains. This is probably the most frequently cited reason why a lot of people don't even like the show, mainly because Legacies does not feel at all connected to the other 2 shows in like any way. Don't get me wrong, the originals also feels a lot different than its predecessor show because its themes are a lot darker than the Vampire Diaries. In fact, the show in general is a lot darker than the Vampire Diaries. But at least with the originals, the lore surrounding the show does not take as much of the drastic detour that Legacies did. Like, I'm not even exaggerating when I say this. Other than the names of characters and locations, Legacies is basically its own standalone show because the lore and mythology is so drastically different that it doesn't actually feel like it's a part of the TVD universe. And like I said at the start of the video, this is one of the reasons why TVD slowly died down in terms of quality, because the show slowly became too convoluted in terms of its mythology to the point where you can't explain the lore without creating plot holes and contradictions, in which there were a few, but Legacies took that issue and multiplied it tenfold. Like, there was a lot of plot holes in Legacy, to the point that it even contradicts its own show. For example, Ken said this.
I was a father, determined to protect his family from Malavor. At least the ones he hadn't already consumed.
This implied that Malavor consumed other gods, which is why he wanted Jen to lock him and the rest of his family up. And we know that when Malavor absorbs you, the whole world forgets who you are. Obviously, we know the ability doesn't work on gods, but Ken somehow believed it does, because that was the whole reason why he wanted to be locked up in the first place, because Jen said this.
You offered me protection once, and for the first time, we needed.
I had never seen that look on his face before, so it took me a minute to figure out what it was. My all-powerful father was afraid.
What does an omnipotent deity fear?
Gods are only as powerful as people's belief in them, which had diminished over the years. And then the ultimate death sentence for a god came along. A creature that could make the world forget you ever existed.
Which doesn't make any sense, because why the hell would they assume Malavor's memory wipe ability works on them if they can remember family members that got consumed by Malavor? Because that's the exact reason why he even came to the conclusion that Malavor is even dangerous to them in the first place. Also, speaking of his family members, where did they go after Malavor died? Because every being trapped within Malavor was sent to either Limbo or released back onto Earth. So where did they go? Lynn never mentioned them, and neither did Jen or Ben or Ken. In fact, no one else even mentioned them for that matter. And that's not even all. You got Sebastian, whose whole existence doesn't make any sense. He was somehow desiccated and buried within the Salvatore boarding school in an old water mill for 480 years, and Damon, nor Stefan, or Elena, or Caroline, or Alaric, or anyone for that matter, knew of his existence even though the mill exists within the Salvatore compound. How? But well enough, that isn't the biggest plot hole about his character, because there was a whole anti-magic barrier within Mystic Falls at the end of season 5 and at the first part of season 6. This barrier removes all spirit and dark magic in Mystic Falls, and if you're a vampire, this is what happens to you.
The spell the travelers cast across Mystic Falls eliminates spirit magic. So while my people continue to have access to the Earth's purest magic, your friend Tyler will be stripped of everything the witches did to him. First his hybrid side, then his vampirism. And with no vampirism to keep him alive, he'll just be a boy with a werewolf gene who happened to break his neck.
No! 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 Don't do this! No! No! Stop! Stop! Please don't! Don't! No! Please!
Yeah, you die the same way you did as a human to become a vampire, as the thing that's actually holding your immortality is stripped away from you. And why is this important? Because all Sebastian here is a vampire that was in the Salvatore compound, which exists in Mystic Falls, meaning he should be dead years ago. But the most egregious one isn't even that. The most egregious one is the Afterlife dimensions. Oh my god, does that make combining the lore of the 3 shows way too difficult for no reason. Like in Legacies, we learned that peace is the end all be all of death. Once you get to peace, you are done. As in, you are dead. You can't return unless somebody resurrects you from the mortal plane. And you don't see anyone on the mortal plane whilst you still at peace. Getting to peace means you have died completely. So what is this? In TVD, specifically in Season 8, it's implied beings at peace can somewhat see the mortal world, but they are just invisible, similar to the other side. Even if you say that they have to want to do that, there is no way Joe didn't check up on Alaric at least once and discovered that her children are still alive, because she had no idea they survived the first meeting of Kai. Also, where the hell was Elena's spirit when she was cursed by Kai? Is this limbo? That wouldn't make any sense, because the sun doesn't rise in limbo, so this has to be peace. But how would she end up there? She isn't completely dead. In fact, she isn't even dead in the first place. If it's a separate plane within Limbo, you can explain how Bonnie ended up there because they actually had a link, but why was Enzo there? He has a link to Elena. How did he find her? This is a similar problem with Hope and Haley. When Hope nearly died completing the originals and saw her dead mother, was that peace or Limbo? Because it can't be peace because Hope wasn't completely dead. And it can't be Limbo either because Haley wouldn't have called it peace. And in Legacy Season 4, when Hope was looking for Klaus when she thought he was still at Limbo, she would have asked Lana to search for Haley as well because she would still assume that she also would still be in Limbo. And that's not even all. If I would detail every contrivance and plot holes, I would be out for like an hour. So it's safe to say, Legacies had a mythology problem. And this is because the lore and world building got expanded drastically way too quickly. Now, I'm not saying that I hate the monster hunting aspects of Legacies because I love Supernatural and it has a very similar element at the start of the show, just a lot more darker. However, in Supernatural, after the first season, whenever they go hunting something, it is directly related to the main story. As in them going after that specific monster or demon ties directly to the main story, and when the monster hunting aspects have barely anything to do with the main story, it feels like a filler episode every single time. You generally can skip it and not miss too much, and it gets very boring. The only reason why you would want to watch it is because the main characters are just that entertaining. This is the same way I feel about Legacies. If the characters weren't entertaining, I doubt you'd be able to actually get past the first season because legit the first 2 to 3 seasons, most of the episodes can be summarized with Malvo is sending another monster against us and we have to defeat it. And that's the same thing that happens again and again, like every single episode. It is a drastic change from the straightforward storylines of TVD and the originals that backfired greatly because it's just not that interesting. Like it messed up the mythology for no reason. Like the mythology has been expanded so greatly that whenever I make a post talking about characters in the Vampire Diaries universe, people that actually haven't watched Legacies yet will be like, what the hell is a vamp dragon? This is a vamp dragon. Yes, there's dragons in Legacies. Like we went from vampires, werewolves and witches and even at worst psychics and sirens to fairies, Santa Claus, yes, Santa Claus, dragons, a tree woman and a mudman. This is probably the biggest saving grace of the show because like I said earlier on, for me at least, it's the only reason why I continue watching the show, along with the fact that I loved both Vampire Diaries and the original so much that the momentum actually pushed me all the way through the series. But anyways, when it comes to the characters and Legacies, they were very entertaining. I love some of them, for example Hope, Josie, Lizzie, Aurora and Kai. I sort of have a love-hate relationship with Alaric, mainly because his opinions tend to annoy me sometimes. But as for everyone else, I'm either indifferent about them, or I don't care about them like at all, or I just hate their characters. And that's only for villains, specifically one, which is Malifaux. But in terms of the characters that weren't actually villains, even with the characters that I said I love, other than Hope, none of them were good characters. Basically, almost every storyline is either terrible or just meh. Like, generally speaking, it's near impossible to tell me a great scene from any character, excluding Hope, that doesn't involve fighting. You know what, I can even extend it to Hope because you can't find a single scene where you actually pause the episode and rewind because a great scene just happened. Like a great monologue or great dialogue just happened. That never happens. Most of the great scenes in Legacies are scenes that involve punching each other. Now, when you compare it to the originals, it's basically the exact opposite. The originals have so many great scenes. Like basically every single time Klaus actually opened his mouth and speak. Like just watch the trial scene in the season 3. I think it was like 10 minutes or so. No punches were even thrown, just straight dialogue, and it's so good that you are basically glued to the screen for the entire time it's on. Klaus isn't even the only one. You have Rebekah's We Are Damaged Beyond Repair scene. In fact, Rebekah and Klaus for that entire episode were great. You have Elijah's This Was Our Family's Hope speech. Like, you know, a show is that good that even characters that have no business having good dialogue or monologues were actually having great ones. For example, Josh ranting to Marcel about how powerless he actually feels over the death of his boyfriend Aiden, or Vincent's Consequences Be Damned speech to Marcel. Even things behind the Black Horizon dialogue of Elijah were great. Like, these were all great scenes in which not a single punch were thrown. It helped showcase character motivations and their reactions to events happening around them in great detail, which Legacies did not do. Like, Legacies didn't particularly have that many great scenes. Now you might say, well, it's the originals. The originals is drastically better than Legacies, but even with TVD, it's the exact same thing. There were a lot of great scenes even without action. For example, Katherine reading the history book about her family and crying. Not a single word was said, not a single punch was thrown, just her reading a book and crying was a great scene. Another one would be us actually getting to see just how far the extent of Michael's mental destruction of Klaus had actually gotten in season 3. Or Rebekah breaking down and telling Elena just how dreadful her life has become because of Michael and Esther making her into a vampire, and just how envious she was towards humans because it's physically impossible for her to have what they actually have, because of something that was actually done to her against her will. Like when you notice the show stopped caring about scenes like this, which is like from season 4 onwards, you will notice the show takes a drastic dip in quality because the show became less about things like platonic relationships and motivations, and began caring more about which ship they prefer and actively rowing characters to make that ship actually work. For example, Elena and very nearly Caroline of Klaus. Like I was so happy that romantic relationships wasn't a big deal in the originals. They were romantic relationships, sure, but it wasn't even remotely close to being a big part of the show. Like what TVD and Legacies were. There was even a love triangle in the originals with Haley, Jackson, and Elijah, but none of the characters were ruined because of it. Like, do you know that this was a love triangle? I don't know who greenlit this. Alaric literally taught Caroline when she was still a child. I don't know who actually thought this was a good idea, but it's weird. It was really weird. I don't know why they actually brought it up, and I think it's mainly because they just wanted to create cheap storylines. But yeah, like I said at the start of the video, Legacies took the dreadful aspects of TVD and used that for the show. Like, did you realize when romantic relationships took a back burner to the show, that's when the show's quality actually like improved. Like a large chunk of Hope's character was just her relationship with Landon. Another boring basic character, and at some point even started becoming very repetitive. Like a lot of people love No Humanity Hope not just because of her witty one-liners, but because she was allowed to be a standalone character, and her in just those episodes, in fact her during the entirety of season 4, is better than any of her storylines in the first 3 seasons combined. This is the exact same sentiment I have with Lizzie. The same way I feel about Lizzie is the exact same way I feel about Enzo in the Vampire Diaries. They are both okay at best characters, but they are very entertaining to watch. And like Hope, it also took Lizzie all the way to season 4 to be an average to good character that actually had storylines far better than all the storylines she actually had in the first 3 seasons. But to be honest, it's really a big shame it actually took them to the 4th season to actually know how to write the main characters properly. Mainly because they focused on the awful Malivore storyline, which is going to be my next point. Now before I actually begin ranting about just how awful of a character Malivore was, I have to at least share a hot take about the originals first. Which is that the originals did not have a single villain that was a great character. Like, none. The only way you can find one is if you say Marcel is somehow a villain. But everyone else wasn't a great character. Like, every other villain other than Marcel wasn't a great character. Now I know what you're thinking, what about Dahlia? But be honest, what's so great about Dahlia? What's great about the writing of Dahlia's character? Not much. But if the originals didn't have any great character writing for villains in the first 3 seasons, why is it still so good? Well, that's because these villains are what I like to call Ozai type villains. If you watch Avatar: The Last Airbender, you will understand, but to summarize it, the main overarching villain for Avatar is Fire Lord Ozai, and in terms of writing, there is literally nothing sophisticated about him. He's just evil and the big bad guy of the show that just wants world domination. That's it. But this is still effective somehow. Why, you may ask? Because of the effect he actually has on the story and the characters within the story. Not even just the main heroic characters, but with other villains like Azula. Like, we didn't even see his face till season 3, but everything about the characters within Avatar, like the motivations and the views on the world, like literally everything that's so great about the show and the characters is because of the existence of Fire Lord Ozai. Even though he's probably the most simplistic villain I've ever seen on TV. And this was something that was mirrored in the originals, at least when he was actually still good, just not to the same degree, as the villains aren't as simplistic as Ozai. But the effect they actually have on the story and on the characters within the story is what make them great villains, although they're not really great written characters. For example, since I mentioned Dahlia earlier, let's start with her. Dahlia's mere existence caused basically every relationship between the main characters, all of it to actually unravel completely. Klaus's paranoia was greatly heightened in season 2 due to Dahlia's existence, and this caused them to push everyone out. Mainly because he doesn't particularly trust any of them because he believed all of them were compromised. Haley because of allegiance to Jackson, Elijah because she believes whatever Haley tells him, and Freya because she is a stranger and the last time he checks, she tried to kill Hope. And because of this, it made it far too easy for everyone to manipulate each other to turn on him and dagger him, which forced him to do his insane plan to save Hope, which makes his family and his allies all hate him even more than they already did, because he had to screw over everyone else to actually complete his plan. He noticed this and actually tried to change his behavior and became a lot less paranoid and more trusting of people. And overall in season 3, he actually tried to be a good person for the people that he actually loved. And because of that, he lost his awareness that he had in season 2, and this is what happened as a result. Even with Lucien, even though Lucien has killed both his brother and his girlfriend, and Klaus knew exactly how to kill Lucien, he still advised Freya to not go down the road of sacrificing Evina to be able to actually take down Lucien, because Klaus was starting to change for the good and knows what doing that will actually cause to Marcel, because Marcel loved Evina. Later on, Freya felt like she didn't have a choice and did it anyways along with Elijah, which creates an even bigger problem with Marcel, which all led to the trial scene, which led to Klaus's first defeat. So you see my point about the villains, they weren't particularly great characters, but the impact of the story is what made them great villains. And every single one of the villains and their storyline is linked directly to the following villain in the next season or the next villain within that same season. Now, why was this important to Legacies? Well, Legacies did not have any of that, like, at all. They have what is quite possibly one of the worst characters I've ever seen as the main villain for over 3 seasons straight. Like, I don't know why we went from a blue light in the originals, which was a terrible character by the way, to a mudman in Legacies. Like, Malivore was just an awful character, an awful idea, like he barely had a positive effect on the story. We didn't even get to hear him speak for like 2 seasons straight. Like, looking back at it, I don't even understand why they thought it was a bright idea to have him on for 4 seasons. People didn't like or care about him in season 1. They didn't like or care about him in season 2. The same thing with season 3. So why the hell was he still alive in season 4? He's boring, he has no personality, not one single great scene, he had no chemistry with anyone. The only good effect he had on the story was making Hope darker, which kudos to him on that one because that benefited the character greatly. But other than that, he was awful all around. We spent over 3 seasons with him and we barely know anything about him. He wants to have a physical body. Why? What did he witness? Why did he come to that conclusion? We don't know. Like, my god, was that character terrible. And he's even the only one. Ken is even another one. Like, with him, I don't feel anything about him. Apparently he has motivations, but his motivations are just, oh, I want to kill her because she's powerful and I don't like that. That's so dumb. And his other motivation is just, oh, my daughter betrayed me by locking me up. I mean, why the hell would she not? You killed so many people that your sister felt pity and tried to give the people that you killed a good afterlife, and you got mad that she did that, so you cursed her and made that her permanent job. Like, the only villains from Legacies that were average to good were protagonists or hero characters that became darker, like Dark Jersey or Hope, and villains from the other shows that made an appearance in Legacies like Kai and Aurora. But anyways, it's really a massive shame that Legacies got cancelled when it actually started becoming good, because I genuinely believe the show actually starts to show promise in season 4. And I even believe season 5 would have actually been a good season. It's just that we will never know because it got cancelled. But anyways, let me know in the comments below if you actually agree or disagree with my opinion, or if there were points I actually missed, because again, this is strictly just what I think about the show, and everyone can have their own opinion on the show, so let me know what you think about that in the comments below. But anyways, love you all, thank you for 1,000 subscribers, and if you want to hear more about that crazy plan from Klaus I talked about earlier, then click on the video that's on screen now.